Alright, so my first video, I'm going to talk about how to hold a pistol for my new shooters. So a lot of times you see new shooters pick up a gun at the gun store or whatever, and they instinctively grab the gun by the handle and then their finger goes to the trigger like this. They instinctively do it. So that's bad, because we're taught not to put your finger on the trigger until you're on target and ready to fire, and you're sure that you're going to fire. Otherwise, you can point at your target or whatever and still have your finger off the trigger. Now, obviously, we have to recite our 4 golden firearm rules, which is treat every firearm as if it's loaded, point the gun in a safe direction, do not point it at anything that you do not wish to shoot or destroy. 3 is be sure of your foreground, your target's foreground and background, like meaning, you know, your backstop and all that stuff. What's in front of the target, what's behind it. And 4th, finally, is the, well, these don't have to be in that order, but anyway, the 4th one is do not put your finger on the trigger until you're on target and ready to shoot. Anyway, so what you should do when you pick a firearm is obviously grip it as high as you can on the back. There's a little tang here, or beaver tail, whatever you want to call it. You want to get your hand as high up on it as you can with the web of your hand, as high as you can, and then you wrap your fingers around and your thumb as high up as you can, and this just kind of goes to your palm or whatever. And you want to make sure that, it's hard to see, the firearm is as straight in line with your arm as you can. I guess I can do it from this angle. That way, all the energy, if you need to shoot one-handed, can be absorbed by your skeletal structure. Anyway, we'll talk about grip later, but this is how you should grip, or at least pick up a firearm. Is once you've done that, make sure your finger is somewhere along the frame. I would caution you to put it on the frame somewhere, or even on the above the frame, like on a Glock pistol, where the frame meets the slide. There's a little ridge here. You can always kind of use that as a reference point. I see some people, well, this is an empty firearm. I've seen some people put their finger on the ejection port like this, very high, and that's fine if your finger can reach and it's comfortable for you, because then at least you know your finger is indexed at a good point. So if you happen to have a sympathetic clench response, like something you're doing with your left hand, and your right hand is trying to match it, and you clench and try and squeeze, for example, if you have your finger in front of your trigger guard like this, where a lot of people teach you to put your finger, you can inadvertently slip your finger in the trigger guard and fire off a shot without meaning to. Anyway, so you would want to keep your finger as high up as you can, and you can practice this. So you put your gun down and you go to pick it up, you put your fingers around the grip, and your finger rests on the frame or somewhere, instead of instinctively grab it and put your finger on the trigger. You'll see this a lot on like Hollywood films and TV shows too. Like you see an actor or whatever, they just grab the gun and they're sitting there talking to, you know, the rest of the cast or whatever, and their fingers on the trigger the whole time, and you're just kind of cringing the whole time, like, oh my god, So anyway, you would, on a Glock pistol, there's these takedown levers. So for the folks that don't have as long of fingers, you can always use that as a reference point, like, hey, that's a good place to kind of rest your finger when you're not on the trigger. And when you're finally on needing to go on the trigger, you know, you can then just move it down. It's very quick. It's not gonna like get you killed or nothing. So anyway, practice this. Hold your finger away from the trigger. Make a mental note like, hey, it's, you know, I need to feel like establish a reference point for my finger to rest on away from the trigger or in front of the trigger guard. Just make sure that you constantly like think, hey, is my finger on the trigger? Okay, it's not. Okay, good, we're good to go. So after a while, it would just be natural. You wouldn't even think about it. So every time, you know, you see people go, oh, hey, you got really good trigger discipline. Like, okay, thanks, but you know, I'm at the point where I don't even think about it. I don't ever put my finger in the trigger guard, much less on the trigger, unless I'm ready to fire. So otherwise, it's always out. It's either on the slide, on the frame, whatever. So that's just kind of one of those things that takes a little bit of practice, reps, good reps, and eventually it'll just be reflex, like you wouldn't even think about it. So that's my first lesson, I guess you can say. I'll try and make more of these videos as I have time.